Well, that only took me about 19 authentication steps to get into Discord there, so that's impressive.
Great.
Well, you wouldn't want to.
Wouldn't want anyone breaking in pretending to be me in the PC Pro
see.
podcast chat. That would be absolutely horrific. Is Tim actually with us, or have I bombed out?
I can see you both.
Yeah, I can hear.
I don't think he can hear us.
Can you hear me, Tim?
Yeah, he's dead.
Can't hear
I
you,
lost
Tim.
you. It's real tech.
No, you're gating. You've got horrible gating on your microphone.
He's delayed for me again.
Welcome to the PC Pro podcast, the world's most technically flawless podcast.
Tim's trying some new software
Honestly.
or something.
No, I switched to a new piece of hardware, and it's got this Realtek audio console that's trying to do clever stuff.
Well,
And that clever stuff
maybe
is
there's a
completely
clue there.
screwing me up.
Yeah,
Am I still horribly gated, John, or is it okay?
you're miles out of sync.
Can we
you're
get away
way
with
out
it?
of sync and still gated somewhat. Can you go back to your old microphone or not?
This is the microphone, John.
We
It's
can't
the
hear
software
you.
that is trying
No,
to.
it's just like a 2-second.
Okay, guys, I can't. John, do you want to take this one? Then? I'll just skip out. See if this is too
Okay, what are we going to do for item 4?
We'll skip
Or
item 4.
Barry.
And what about nib A?
We'll sing a song, I think.
All right.
Any suggestions from the YouTube crowd?
I don't
We
mind.
take requests. Please put $1 in the bartender's jug.
Yeah,
Have
I
you
can
not got
run.
another PC, Tim? Surely you've got a laptop. Oh no, he's gone.
We're now running late.
Tim's got
Okay,
about 19 PCs.
are we recording?
Just none of them work. Who knows? Because Tim's at the controls. Yeah, that's not. Oh, here he comes.
He's back.
Right, I'm going to try one last time.
Oh, that's better.
Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes, no problem at all.
Yeah, you also can't leave Tim because you're the one recording.
Okay. All right. So are we? Am I synced? Okay.
Yes, you're good.
Just about.
Okay. All right. Shall we just pray and hope that it manages to work for the rest of an hour?
Why
It's
not?
worked for 20 years.
Okay. All right. I haven't even looked on Discord yet. We're probably getting a lot of grief, aren't we?
Pater D is giving some
Oh, yeah.
shade on Discord, and he's your own father.
Oh, dear me.
my
In
own
trouble
father.
now.
You're getting badmouthed by your dad.
Yeah. Well,
Owned, as the kids
let's
say.
kick him off. Kick him off. I can. I think I have the power to kick him off Discord. All right. Anyway, so no more sass. Hello and welcome to the PC Pro podcast on the 19th of March 2026. Happy belated birthday to my father. That was last week. All right. So what have we got today with us today? We have Barry Collins.
Hello, happy belated birthday to my dad, who was 75 in May, I think.
John?
Me?
John Honeyball?
Oh, yes, hello. I'm
Requests
Hel-
you want to push out?
Nah, I'm going to be really boring.
Any tunes?
Oh, you wouldn't like my musical taste.
Well, we don't know that, John. And Mr. Nick Rawlinson.
It's my mum's birthday today.
Oh, happy birthday to her.
She won't be listening.
Cut out. Say that again. Say that again, Nick.
Oh,
Whose birthday was that?
Tim. It's my mum's birthday today.
Maybe we should just write
Really?
everything out for Tim on a little board.
Tim's
Can
software's
anyone do
broken
semaphore?
Yeah, and then he can hear us. If anyone
Wow,
on
that's
Discord
amazing.
can transcribe what we're saying for Tim, that would be really handy.
Well, I'll tell you what. Luckily, there is a new technology in town, isn't there, Barry?
Yes, this is Alexa Plus, which has apparently launched in the UK today, although we're yet to receive our official switch on. So I'm not sure if anybody's actually using it. Alexa Plus is the sort of smarter version of Alexa, which acts more like your Chat GPTs, your Claudes, much more of an LLM type of AI rather than the rather staccato AI that we've been used to. Alexa, believe it or not, is 10 years old now, or it'll be 10 years old
Well,
in the
happy
autumn.
birthday, Alexa.
Yeah, while we're dishing out the birthdays. And according to Daniel Rausch, who is the VP of Alexa and Echo, who was speaking at the event we went to yesterday, the UK customers are the most engaged on the planet when it comes to Alexa. More than half of UK households have an Alexa-enabled device, he claims, and 110 billion interactions have been made with Alexa since 2023. So just to prove I was paying attention in a press conference for once, there's the stats. So what does Alexa do now that it didn't do before? And the simple answer is it's a lot more conversational. It's a lot more natural to speak to Alexa than it is currently. Anyone who's got an Alexa device in the house, I'm just checking to make sure I've turned mine off, will know that even to do something as basic as play a song from Spotify, you basically have to get the words in pretty much the right order before it will do anything. It's very prescriptive about how it interacts with you. The new one, according to our friends from Amazon, because we're yet to be able to test this for ourselves, suggests that, very much like talking to ChatGPT or any others, it can understand a variety of phrases, can answer pretty much any question you like, according to Amazon, and it's much more forgiving of stumbles in speech or using alternative phrases. Apparently, they've trained it on more than 40 UK dialects as well. So if you're a Geordie or from Belfast or from Liverpool, it should apparently understand you as well as it should somebody from the home counties. Again, we'll have to wait and see whether that's actually true or not. So what is it like in real life? I can only base this on the demonstrations that were made by Amazon yesterday because I've not switched my account on yet. But there are lots. It tries to answer with lots of UK idioms, which is a little bit grating. So one of the demos, they asked, what was the Arsenal score last night? Because Arsenal played in the Champions League on Tuesday night. And it replied, fantastic news, mate. Arsenal absolutely smashed it, before going on to describe the game in some detail. It keeps throwing in words like proper into conversations. So you'll say, can you recommend a new coffee maker? Go, oh, the DeLonghi 69695 is a proper coffee maker. It keeps throwing in these weird sort of English phrases. When he held up something to the camera to see if it could recognise what it was, it said, I'll take a gander at that. And it's just really sort of horribly cringy and cloying at times. But there is promise of some genuinely useful stuff there. So one of the demos, the guy asked for Indian restaurant recommendations. We were in central London yesterday. It throws up 5 local Indian restaurants. And then he says, well, can you book a table for 2 whenever I have a free hour in my diary? And it goes off, looks in his diary, sees he's got a slot at 2 o'clock, books it via OpenTable. There's lots of integrations with different partners. Says it's all booked, comes back and he says, great, send Kerry an email saying we're on for lunch today. And it reads back the text of a quick email it plans to send, and he says, yep, that's great, send. So it sounds like if you integrate your various accounts with many different services, that Alexa's able to interact with them. And that could be, I say, we've not tested this yet, quite useful in some scenarios. They've got partnerships with a whole range of people, ranging from news providers like the BBC and The Guardian and our very own Future Publishing, through to people like OpenTable, Checkatrade, Uber Eats. So lots of different third parties that have apparently integrated their services. Obviously, you're going to have to go through some kind of process of joining up your accounts to those devices at some stage. But if it works as they showed it working, then it looks like there's some good stuff there. Other demos they showed, so you can do things like send PDFs to Alexa. There's some kind of email address that you can send emails to. So if you as any parent will know, you get a school newsletter for your kids. They're all like 40-page PDFs telling you everything that's gone on in the last 18 years. You can ping that off to Alexa, and it will put key dates like school closures and whatever automatically in your diary. You can ask it, when's the sports match, and it will go through the PDF and give you the right answer, hopefully. There was other demos where they set up this sort of free mock rooms of a home, and in the living room, for example, the guy would go, Alexa, it's a bit warm in here, and it would automatically turn on the fan. So you don't have to say, Alexa, turn on the fan to 80% of whatever you do these days. It just is able to react with common sense with the devices that you've got connected to your Alexa. Some of the other demos were a little bit more mad. There was the living room demo where the woman just started a random conversation and said, "Hey Alexa, who won the Best Actress award at the Oscars last week?" And it was I can't remember her name, but an actress who was starred in Hamlet. And it said, "Oh, she recently appeared in Hamlet. Oh, great! Can you play Hamlet for me now?" And it obviously starts a video player from Amazon Prime Video, and you sort of think, who in the world has that kind of conversation and then sits there to watch a 2-hour film? It's just, I find that kind of thing baffling. But so I think they were sort of. Go on.
Was there anything that made you think, actually, though, that would make me change what I do?
Well, like I said, I think the real strength is possibly those integrations. So if it does actually interact with those services as smoothly as they showed in their demos, then I think that could be different. Because even using something like ChatGPT, which has these kind of integrations built in now, it's still a bit clunky. You still have to sort of say, at Slack, show me what I've missed over the past 4 hours in conversations and things. It's all a little bit awkward. If I can just say to Alexa, "Hey, check my Slack and who's on the podcast this week," to check if I'm on the show, then I think that could be very handy. So it really depends how well those interactions work, I would say. I mean, there was another random demo where the woman just sort of said, "Hey, I'm looking for a new coffee machine. What would you recommend?" And it recommends some £300 machine, and she goes, "Yeah, I'll have that. Just buy me a coffee machine." People just don't do that. So I think of the limited demos they had, they were really struggling to show things that I felt was going to make a practical difference to my life. But like I say, the interactions are the only things where I think that could be useful if they pull it off.
Can I ask what you use your Alexa for now, Barry?
Mainly just playing music, or I do have various smart home devices. So we've got lights controlled in the living room and heaters connected in my office here. So, if I'm down in my lounge the first thing in the morning, it's really nippy, I'll tell it to turn on the heater, or we turn on the lights. Right. The one really useful thing it does, our dog has a habit of waking up in the middle of the night needing a wee, and there's an Alexa setting where it detects dogs barking, and because we're 3 floors up, we can't always hear it. So we get an Alexa alert that the dog's barking, which has saved us from a few wet carpets in recent months. But other than that, it doesn't
automatically open the door or anything.
Alas, not. No, I'd have to buy one of those smart pet doors, and I don't think we're quite at that level yet.
Okay. Nick, are you an Alexa user?
I've got several, but I've been stripping them out of various rooms. There was one right at the front of the house that used to hear everything you said anywhere in the house, which was very frustrating, because obviously if you wanted to do something in a particular room and then it started doing it at the front of the house, that one's gone. I had one in here in the office, that's gone. And I control things now through the apps on my phone. I just got to the point where, not Alexa specifically, but the whole idea of these ever-listening devices, I sort of went off it a bit, and I thought, well, at the end of the day, my phone is listening all the time anyway, or the 2 phones on my desk, because there's one Android, one iOS. And do I need 4 devices? Do I need the Android phone, the iOS phone, the Alexa, and the Google Home, all listening to me? So I've started to reduce the number of devices that have, are within earshot, and I'm thinking a bit more about how I use these in a more mindful manner. Like Barry, I use it a lot for music when I'm cooking. But that is, and for the lighting, and to a degree for the heating as well. But obviously now this season that's going to become less for the next 6 months or so. So I'd kind of like to wean myself off it even more, and I'd like to try things like Home Assistant Green and just see where that could take me with a sort of go more in the privacy direction and maybe less on the integration. And do we really need all these integrations? I don't know. We lived without them since we lived in caves. And suddenly we can't live without integrating Slack with a speaker.
No, I know exactly what you mean. And also Noel Modem agrees with you. He says Nick is sounding sane. I don't know if that means that previously you haven't sounded sane. That's the only problem. John, what about you? Are you an Alexa lover?
Well, obviously we have Alexa systems here in the lab for test purposes, but I don't use Alexa at home. Haven't for years and years and years. In the kitchen, we've got an Apple HomePod, which Andre uses to play music to bop around while cooking and so forth. And that's kind of the only music place it's used for. We have the Philips Hue lights are tied into it as well, so you can turn the bulbs on and off. And that's about as far as I want to take it. I certainly don't want things like remote access of my front door locks and things like this. I could certainly see, lots of use cases here that would work in specific cases, but one thing is absolutely destined to make me unplug it, stamp on it, and throw the pieces in the bin. It's something that's trying to be cheerful to me all day, and the sort of things that Barry was describing is enough to me to, get a baseball bat out and smash the hell out of it, because it's bad enough when I'm in the States to have to put up with, have a nice day, and you sort of reply in an acid term, well, we will see, and they don't know how to respond to that. But something that's trying to, let me go and deal with that for you and see what we can do and high five. I just, no, absolutely not, under any circumstances. Thank you very much. Go away.
I mean, the thing that intrigued me most, Barry, and actually why I want to try it most, is this this idea of it trying to be more matey with you,
Yeah.
and dropping in the proppers and the "all right, geezer, how you doing," that kind of thing, as if that is how we speak in. Well, I'm not saying we don't speak a little bit like that in real life, but it's not what you want your technology to talk to you like. You want your technology to talk to you like it's a machine, because it is. It's one of the most frustrating things about ChatGPT and all the rest of them, is that they try and be your chum, your buddy. I don't want you to be my buddy. Just do the damn thing I asked you to, and leave it at that.
I would add that, I think voice control is super important, obviously. I use voice control all the time in the car with Apple CarPlay, for example, playing music, because Apple has got very hard lockdown on what you can do through the user interface of apps on CarPlay, simply to stop you looking at a screen and poking at keyboards and other things that, we can argue whether they're safe or unsafe. I would fall into the camp of keeping your attention on the road rather than on the interface of a device. So,
Yes.
Although a lot of people protest that things like Apple Music is too limited in what you can do, that you can certainly make a case for these things being wise to be locked down. I use voice control to my watch a lot, but it's when I want it to happen, and I absolutely do not want it to start trying to be nice back to me. I would be happy with a little sort of bing to say it understood and did what I asked for, and I don't need a conversation. To me, that's just digital garbage.
Or everything in the voice of Marvin the Paranoid Android. I think that would be acceptable as well. Barry, just
yes.
getting us back on track to Alexa Plus rather. So this is being launched in the UK today. It will everyone's systems just automatically switch over? Do they need to do anything?
No, so it's in what Amazon call early access at the moment. So the only way they will open up an invitation scheme so people can apply to join. The other way you can sort of jump the queue is to buy a compatible Alexa device. So apparently I think like pretty much any device you can bought from the last 5, 6, 7 years should work with Alexa Plus, including you don't need the screen. So even the sort of dots and the plain echo speakers should work with Alexa Plus, but it does work better with a screen, I think. Certainly in terms, or with a camera, even in terms of being able to detect what something you're showing it. So you're showing it a packet of food substance. What can I cook with this, for example? Was one of the things they showed yesterday.
Who does that?
Again, yeah, it does.
Come on.
I was trying to think he was showing it. He said his kids loves. He was an American guy, so his kids love weird snacks. So he sent one of the staff out yesterday to buy his kids weird snacks, and they came back with pickled onion Monster Munch, and he was trying to ask Alexa what they were. But yeah, again, the use cases for that are pretty slight. Actually, one thing I forgot to mention was that it's also quite good now at setting up those routines. So on Alexa, you can say, Alexa, good morning, and it can turn on your lights, turn on the heating, pull up your blinds, that kind of thing. But they are quite difficult to set up. It's lots of tapping around in the Alexa app. Whereas now you can just say, Alexa, when I say this, do this, 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 and this, and it creates the routine. So that, again, could be more user-friendly, more useful than perhaps it was previously.
Ron, very quickly, because I do want to close up on this one.
Sure. And I think Monster Munch is a fine idea. I haven't had one of those in decades. You've now made me want to rush out. One question, is there any suggestion of charging a subscription to do this? Because the obvious next thought is this is going to be doing quite a lot of CPU power on the back end to support this. So how are they funding it?
Well, I mean, there is a subscription. It's about £20 a month for this, but it's thrown in with Amazon Prime. So if you're a Prime subscriber, which I think a good chunk of Amazon users are, then you get it for free. Although, we have seen, quite recently, Amazon threw in the video service for free with Prime, and then it's started to introduce ads and then started to introduce premium elements of that. So I wonder over the course of time whether they will, turn the screw and make it more expensive for Prime subscribers. But right now, no. If you've got a Prime subscription, it's going to be free.
Okay, thank you very much. John, on to Companies House News.
Yes, this is really, I was going to say really quite shocking, but then it involves government IT, so I guess we shouldn't be shocked. Dan Needle, who's a good chap on Twitter, he is expert in taxation and taxation law and lobbying and all that kind of stuff. Well worth following. Don't necessarily agree with him a lot of the time, but that's not the point. He really does know his stuff and puts very coherent arguments for the positions that he takes. He discovered, and he's reported it on his website, which is Tax Policy Associates, which is taxpolicy.org.uk. He discovered that basically there was a monumental hole in Companies House. Now, Companies House, of course, is where you have to go as a business and register details of directors and where you file your accounts and all of this stuff, very important stuff on Gov.uk related to running companies and obviously then charities and all of these legally defined entities that we have in the UK. And it's the one place you have to go and you have to deal with this. And recently there's been a whole round of stuff about authenticating yourself for Companies House as a director. So if any of you are directors, you will have had to have been doing this over the last few months. Anyway, he discovered, along with one of his colleagues, that basically you could log in to Companies House dashboard as you, which is of course authenticated, and then you could say, basically what you then do is you say, file for another company. I'm just trying to get exactly the correct wording here. I'm just finding it here in his report. Doesn't matter. Basically, you say file on behalf of another company, and then you need to be authenticated. Let me read his paragraph because it explains it really well. All that was required was to log into Companies House using your own details and access your own company's dashboard. That's all good. That's not a problem. Then opt to file for another company and enter the company number of any one of the 5 million companies registered with Companies House. So provided you know the company registered number, you can do file on behalf of another company, enter their company number. At this point, you're asked for an authentication code, as you would expect. And you don't have one, because of course it's not your company. However, if you then press the back key 4 times, you get back to the dashboard. Except it's not your dashboard, it's the company's dashboard of the number of the company that you entered trying to log in. You see the problem? And you can then go about changing information and viewing information which is securely and privately held about that other company and its directors and so forth. This is a monumental gaping hole. And really, really troubling because often there's reasons why, the home addresses of directors is registered with Companies House, but it's not visible to the public if you search for the details on a company, and all of this kind of stuff. Gaspingly incompetent. Now, yesterday or day before, I received, on the 17th, so that's 2 days ago, I received an email from Companies House. Funnily enough, I've got, 3 or 4 companies directors of, and it wrote to tell me, they were writing to tell me about an issue that affected our web filing service. And they say on Friday 13th of March, we identified an issue with web filing. Well, no. Dan Needle and his colleagues discovered this and told them about it. They took the service offline at 1:30. They tested it again, and it came back again on Monday the 16th. The issue arose from a system update in October 2025. I'm reading from their email here. So this has been live for 5 months or so. Just ponder that for a moment. And was not the result of a malicious attempt to attack our systems. No, it was actually your incompetence in your web platform. It is not a cyber attack. The issue could only be exploited by a logged-in user performing a specific set of actions. Well, yes. It allowed for somebody to see certain data not normally published, like date of birth of directors, residential address for directors, company registered email addresses, file updates to any information without consent, for example, new accounts or changes of director. Now, if your response to that is "Holy cow," we're in the same camp here. This is outrageous. Of course, it comes down to bad, sloppy coding and lack of testing on the Companies House website. And I must confess, Companies House website is an extremely useful tool if you're thinking of, doing some trade or transactions with a company. Just to have a quick look at them and see whether they really are from 45 Acacia Avenue, from the top bedroom on the left, or whether they are a serious enterprise. And it's also useful to pull the accounts of larger companies to see just how big they are, and all of this useful stuff. What you don't expect is for them to make such a howling hole as this, and for it to be there for 5 months and no one to have found it. And the reason no one found it is because no one was doing any serious penetration testing, load testing, and so forth on their website. Now, of course, this is going to raise the question of just how competent are, quote, these people, unquote, at doing something like digital ID or any of the other things that we are moving into in our new digital era. And I think it is really quite terrifying. They're trying to downplay it, saying, it really isn't a really big problem. Don't worry about it. It's not a terribly big deal, but check your information anyway, just to check you haven't gained a new director in Moscow or something like this. But what can you say? I mean, it is gaspingly bad, and total props to Dan Needle for finding this and bringing it to the public attention.
Yeah, generally, John, if let's say you're in the position where you are running a company's website, and this could happen to you, couldn't it? Anybody who's running a website could have this vulnerability, which they don't know about, which is difficult to test for. How would you actually advise people to avoid it?
Well, I think there's 2 points here. One of which is, you might have a website or an e-shop, for example. I mean, for our food and condiments business, we have got an online e-shop, but it's at Shopify, or I can't remember quite where, one of these really, really big sites that does this kind of stuff. And you're basically paying for them to be doing this. It's not like you rolled this yourself on a server in your back room and kind of screwed up a bit. The second point here, of course, is that this is a government department holding legally required data on behalf of the government and on behalf of directors and so forth, and just truly screwing it up. Now, is there going to be a report out of this, or is it all just going to be one of those fantastic, lessons have been learnt, and the usual sort of brush off that happens? I don't think that this is a problem per se that's going to affect Joe Small Company, but goodness me, it's a kick in the teeth for the credibility of HM government IT. Whether that's true or not in terms of all government IT, I think we have to be a bit careful here of saying this was a screw up in one place. But Companies House IT is pretty weak. You can file most anything there and it doesn't spot it. You can have turnover and no income, and they're not doing the sort of digging into file data that you would think they would be doing. So yeah, I mean, total lack of testing, and that's what we're paying for.
I think that's a bit strong. I mean, the set of circumstances in which this was triggered were incredibly unusual. I mean, I'm struggling to think how that guy even worked it out. But I'm not saying it's acceptable. But to say that I can't imagine any testing criteria would go get to this login screen, then press back 4 times.
No, that's not the point. The point here is that they took an authentication for one account and allowed you to look at other stuff because they assumed you were now authenticated. They were not checking that your authentication was for the company you were now looking at. This is just, first level security design for any kind of confidential website. And the fact that they screw that up, I think, is outrageous.
But it only happened in that very specific set of circumstances. Like if you pressed, you couldn't go back and re-enter that data and get into that screen. So like something has gone wrong. Clearly something's gone wrong. I think the fact that they went 5 months and we assume nobody else has found it is indicative of how unusual that flaw was. And so I'm going to put this down on the more forgivable end of cock-ups.
Yeah, I mean, and Jeff Campbell on Discord, who I know well, he says, as a long-time functional and load tester, I was just trying to think how we would test for that, and I came up blank.
Yeah.
He has a valid point. Nevertheless, there is a security design inside this web service that allows credentials to be walked sideways between confidential information. And at least from a high-level point of view, that to me sounds a really dumb thing to have done.
Okay, all right. Thank you, John. Thanks for actually putting that into perspective, because I also got the email, and it was a little bit not entirely transparent, I think it's fair to say, as you've highlighted, so I appreciate that. Nick, perhaps a computer powered by brain cells could have solved this problem.
Who knows? This is a story that's been bubbling along for a few years, and it's sort of popped up again because of a few recent changes. I don't know whether you've heard of a company called Cortical Labs. It's an Australian biotech company, and in 2022, it taught human stem cells to play Pong in a Petri dish. How they use the joysticks and all that, I don't know, because these little things are apparently the size of an ant's brain. Now, last year, it came out with something called the CL1, which it says is a code deployable biological computer. And what that means is that it's 200,000 neurons, I beg your pardon, my spell check has corrected it to neutrons every single time I've written this. It's 200,000 living human neurons spread across the surface of a silicon wafer. It's about the size of a shoebox, this computer. And basically the neurons within it are kept inside a nutrient-rich structure, liquid structure. So it's fed all the time. Basically, it's a biological computer. And it runs what's known as a biological intelligence operating system that creates a simulated world. Can you tell I'm reading this? That sends information directly to the neurons within their environment. And then the impulses from the neurons produce the output that is the useful thing for us as human beings who are using that computer. Now, the company says that the neuron, and this is where it gets really interesting, is effectively a self-programming, infinitely flexible, and the result of 4 billion years of evolution. So what AI models are spending enormous resources in terms of training and power and what have you, cooling and the whole lot, to emulate is what this company is beginning with. Now, I did click buy now on a CL1, and it just took me to a Let's Talk to Sales form. So I can't give you an exact price, but I have seen it widely reported. It's about $35,000, so it's not cheap. But the new news that's
John
just
sold it
appeared,
too.
the new news that's appeared is that the company has now been working on building what it's calling biological data centers. The first one, work on it started in September of last year, and it's 120 CL1 units which have been racked up in Melbourne. And there are plans for another one in Singapore that's going to have 1,000 of these units. And the major benefit, as we sort of touched on earlier, is that they don't require many of the resources that are required by traditional AI outfits, in particular, high power consumption. So each of these CL1 units draws, and this is where somebody at your end of the conversation can help me, because my knowledge of what watts mean is almost nil, 30 watts, which I'm thinking is about the same as a low energy light bulb.
No, it's a lot higher than that.
It's higher than
30 watts is roughly the same as a typical computer idling away.
Okay, which sounds to me fairly promising. So if they can get it to work, hopefully this is going to be a way of running useful AI computing tasks that are currently quite energy intensive in a much more low energy manner.
It's scary, isn't it? Really, and it's almost unbelievable. If this had come out on the 1st of April, you'd have gone, okay, yeah, another one of these stories. But it to me, it sounds like it won't ever really scale. But maybe I'm too cynical, because there are so many people, so many things that happen in development in research labs around the country, around the world, that never actually go beyond this kind of prototype stage and proof of concept stage. So I don't know. Will this ever make it into reality, into something genuinely useful? Barry, what do you think?
I haven't the foggiest, Tim. I barely understood what Nick said, to be brutally frank. But yeah, I honestly don't know. This is like any of those sort of stories you read in the New Scientist, and you go, God, it's great fun to be able to write this stuff. But I reckon about 5% of it we ever actually see.
I remember thinking that about Retina display. I remember, it was announced, I think, on an iPhone first.
Yeah.
And I thought, that's mad. Surely you can see pixels. No one can make anything that small that you can't see pixels. And then obviously I saw it and I believed it. And I thought, well, this will never scale up to a massive screen, because can you imagine the technology you would need to do that? And I think we're still at that stage, in sort of my level of understanding of it anyway, that we were with things as simple as Retina displays that we now take for granted. Obviously, Retina display being an Apple term, but you know what I mean. These screens where the pixels are so small and so packed that we can't just differentiate one from another.
Okay, John.
Not convinced.
No, I'm not at all. Just because it's such a different. And what you're talking about is scaling up an existing technology, whereas here we are talking about a completely new technology, an architecture coming into force in some way. I do have some thoughts about why they said data center, but I'll come on to that after I've heard from John.
I like I had this sort of bizarre image in the way that my brain works in very strange ways. These sort of a thin layer of cells in a petri dish with some food going into it. It sort of sounds like the sort of thing, you crack open a Wilkins jam jar and spread some on your toast, and that's your little brain boost for the morning kind of thing, which anyway, my brain is very strange. Maybe I could do with some of this stuff. I think these are interesting experiments, but how far they're going to go in the quote real world is really hard to know. And how do we? I hate to use the regulate word, but how do we actually manage this kind of thing, such that we don't end up in a horrible mess where it tries crawling out of the petri dish or something? I don't know. I'm being glib, I know, and I have the same concerns over things like Neuralink, drilling a hole in someone's head and then putting in a whole bunch of sensors into their brain, and it all seems really bizarre and horrible. But then you think, well, could it actually do something amazing for people with Parkinson's disease or dementia or something like this? And that, we really do need to do this stuff in order to try and cure those problems. But I'm finding it hard to see a really good reason for clever jam, but maybe there will come a really good outcome.
Clever Jam would be a much better name for the company than what
I'm
you
checking
said,
the
Nick,
domain name
because
now.
Go to the company's house, John. See if you can get yourself on the directorship.
Yeah. Um, uh, so I will quickly say why. Well, actually, just from going off what you said, John, I think you have made. I do kind of agree with you that we have to do these things because they are interesting, and who really knows? I mean, so the first
Yeah.
transistor, as we know it, was invented in I may get this wrong, but 1948 in Bell Labs. So in that time, in the space of less than a century, we've gone from this kind of absolute just an idea being transported into reality into something that dominates and changes our world. So it's not as if this can't happen. We've seen it happen before, and it will probably happen again. And maybe this is it. More cynically, I do think that this company has said data centers because that's the hot new thing at the moment. It's where so much money is being pumped into. And in fact, what I'll do, if you don't mind, is I'll next story, which is just four highlights from GTC 2026, which is Nvidia's big AI conference, basically, where everyone kind of worships the feet of Nvidia and says, "We are not worthy. You are the leaders. Thank you for giving us CUDA," which is 20 years old, by the way. Yes, John.
Cleverjam.com has been taken. I'm sorry about that. But most everything else is available, including things like cleverjam.me and cleverjam.food, which are actually quite tempting.
Okay, that's good to know. I apologise if I'm breaking up. By the way, I'm completely blaming it on my audio software setup, which I am going to burn immediately after this. Anyway, so the four big announcements at GTC 2026, which is just finishing off today in San Jose, California. So I'm just going to pick out four. Which are first of all this idea of digital. Everyone's doubling down on digital employees. And they are building it around OpenClaw, which can you believe actually OpenClaw only came out in January, and already it's making its way into Jensen's keynote in March 2026, where he's basically said Claude Code and OpenClaw has sparked the agent inflection point, extending AI beyond generation and reasoning into action, and basically saying that if every single company in the world now needs an OpenClaw strategy. So, which is quite a bold statement, I would say. Another second thing is that it's just about the sheer pace of change. We had a picture of. We've really only just announced Rubin. Rubin is coming into force in 2027, and that's the all this next stack of technology to make data centers run even more efficiently, even faster. And The point was made by an analyst that if I built, this is the quote, if I built an AI factory a year ago, I'm already having buyer's remorse. This is by Larry Dignan, who's editor-in-chief for Constellation Insights. The architecture complement to 7 chips on the platform, that's the Rubin platform. AI inference improvements and advances add up to a better AI factory. So that's happening this year. And this is all new silicon, remember. And then just to kind of hammer this point home, he announced at the next major architecture, the Feynman platform, which will come in 2028 and include yet another new CPU, new GPU, a new CPU, and a new language processing unit. So you've got all this stuff happening, and it's being developed so quickly. And I spoke to someone who was the head of. Oh God, I'm going to forget the name. Synapsys, I think they named the company. But anyway, that MWC last week or the week before, he was saying just the pace now they are having to use AI to develop the chips, the hardware chips, the silicon, because if they didn't, they just wouldn't be able to keep up with the pace of change. And so this is what's happening. This is what we are in the middle of. Even in the past 2 years, we have accelerated massively in terms of how quickly silicon is being designed. So I thought that was another little thing to take away from the GTC 2026. A third is that we could actually, we're getting a step closer to AI data centers in orbit. Is everyone familiar with this idea already? So this concept is that rather than have data centers on the ground, we should have them up in orbit around the Earth, maybe even on the moon. because it's so much more efficient. Once you've actually manufactured them and sent them up there, it's so much more efficient to have things running in space as opposed to on the grotty old Earth, because you've got you've got a regular power supply just sitting there. It's called the sun. So that we've just a step closer to that, and then finally this one's for Barry. DLSS 5 has been announced, and I'm sure everyone's aware of what DLSS is. It's NVIDIA's collection of technologies to basically enhance the images, to increase frame rates, to make games look better. And they announced that DLSS 5 will arrive in November, and that basically everything's going to look slightly better. And our games will look more beautiful. Everyone's going to look more beautiful. Now, Barry is shaking his head. Why are you shaking your head, Barry?
Well, because if you've seen anything of the social media reveals of this over the last few days, it doesn't look great in some of the initial demos.
Yeah.
Well, DLSS is basically using AI to interpolate, what something should look like, especially textures. And it's gone down like a bucket of sick over the last couple of days, it has to be said.
So it has. And so on our sister site, which is Tom's Hardware, they actually got an interview with Jensen, and he basically told everyone that they're wrong, which is a very autocratic way of responding to these things. But anyway, apparently everyone's wrong, and that we don't need to worry about more AI slop. He says it's not post-processing. It's not post-processing at the frame level. It's generative control at the geometry level. So he's saying it's not just painting a pretty picture, it is changing the whole underlying structure of what you're seeing. But either way, like you say, Barry, the reaction has not been positive from the gamers of this world.
To be fair, I mean, it has made a massive difference up until now. I think they may have, and this is a very early release, so maybe they should be given a little bit of slack. But if I was in charge of that demo, I'd be a bit worried about my job prospects right now.
Yeah, and the demo, there's a YouTube video of it. If you search for announcing NVIDIA DLSS 5 on YouTube, you'll go straight to it. And I think it's only about 2 minutes long. But it's taking someone who looks at it plasticky and trying to make them look more realistic. And that's kind of how I'd put the demo, Barry.
Yeah, maybe. I think it's more about sort of creating textures that look natural. At least it has been until now, like brickwork or feathers on a bird or something, that without absolutely smashing someone's graphics card, so that you're able to get better frame rates by using the AI to interpolate what the texture should look like. But I don't know if they've pushed the switch to 11 on this one and might need to dial it back a bit.
Yeah, they may do. But what also possibly indicates is just how far gaming and the creator market has fallen down in terms of NVIDIA's priorities. Because if it's in terms of how much revenue it's now driving, haven't looked at it, but I bet it's in terms of what they're looking forward to in the next few years. The growth in gaming, etc., is going to be relatively low, if at all. But the growth in data centers and all the rest of it, that's going to be absolutely huge. So you can see that is where NVIDIA is laying all of its money.
Well, you were saying about NVIDIA doing this conference in front of thousands of developers. I remember I was at CES in 2018-19, I think, before the AI thing had completely kicked off, and Jensen Huang was doing his keynote in a private room with about 40 journalists there, and everybody. I was there thinking, why am I even here? And now they're suddenly the biggest company in the world. I mean, the transformation that company's gone through in a very short space of time is incredible, really.
Yeah, no, this is true. Okay, unless Nick and John, you have anything you wish to say, let's move on quickly through the nibs, and I'll just quickly start off with the launch of the Toughbook 56 last week. That was in Sweden. I don't know if I was going to try and do some accent there. That's not a good idea. Anyway, so Panasonic announced the arrival of the next iteration of the Toughbook, and this will sound really stupid, okay? But one of the big pieces of news is that they've got rid of the clip on the that keeps the lid closed when you're moving about. So they finally worked out a way basically to avoid having that clip. which for their target market is actually going to be a huge improvement because they just, if you've got gloves on or all this kind of thing, you can just lift it up easily now rather than trying to dig your fingers in with gloves in the cold, etc. So anyway, there you go. For the market, that's actually quite a nice improvement, and plus they've upgraded the processor, and they've also made it automatically detect what kind of finger is touching the screen. So it will know if you're wearing gloves or whatever. So anyway, it's quite, for its niche, it's a nice step forward. So if you're thinking about buying a rugged laptop this year, then take a look for it. It comes out at the end of April. The next item is with you, John.
Yes, really fun, albeit high end, I accept for the time being, feature coming to Apple Vision Pro, which is NVIDIA's CloudXR 6.0 technology, which is streaming immersive cloud-generated content. Basically, they've worked with Apple so that the Apple Glance and Viewpoint APIs could feed into NVIDIA Cloud XR6, so it can generate world spaces and then stream them down to you. And it does this at 4K per eye and up to 120 frames a second, so fair amount of data going on there, but if you need it, you need it. And one of the fun first things that are coming out on this is X-Plane 12, which is a very high-end simulator, has been around for a while. Is now, you can fly that with Vision Pro goggles on, and headset on rather, and be fully immersive. But you can mix and match local, real physical things with locally generated AR items with the world view coming in from Cloud XR. Another example of this, Volvo apparently is using a new tool from Autodesk called Immersive for Autodesk VRED, so you can actually go looking around the interior of a car, for example, for the R&D designers, and see the whole thing rendered. Very exciting stuff, and a good example of the B2B type of stuff that Vision Pro's really excelling in at the moment.
Thank you, and quickly, Nick, third and final nib.
The nibbiest of nibs. There's 8 competing standards so far that BBC has found for some kind of sticker that proves something hasn't been generated using AI. So if you want to read a book made by a human, how do you denote it? At the moment, all these organisations are trying to come together and decide on what we should do with real products to denote them from products that are generated by AI. No one's decided.
Okay. Well, this podcast has not been generated by AI. I don't think any AI is quite deranged enough to create this podcast.
No one's going to own up to that.
John, what have you got in your hand?
Oh, I better pick it up then, hadn't I? Yes, here we have my, turn the screen on, my Apple MacBook Neo in lovely citrus. There's 2 versions of the Neo. Neo is Apple's new low-end laptop, new MacBook laptop, starting at £599 for the base model, or £499 if you are educational user, and £699 for the larger storage version, which also includes the fingerprint reader. Very interesting piece of kit, this, I must say, on many fronts, some of which I'm going to have to try and explain in my next RWC column. But what's interesting about it is that it's not an M series processor. It's actually the A series processor, the A18 Pro, which is being used in some phones. And then you might suddenly think to yourself, well, this sounds like a really weak, limp product, because phone CPUs don't tend to be terribly powerful, so why would you even consider trying to run a laptop off of it? And the answer is, it does just fine, thank you very much. The performance on it for a £599, or in my case £699 laptop, is astonishing. The build quality is effectively just the same as a 3,000 quid MacBook Pro. It's the same thing, and if you just sit down in front of one or sit in front of the other, it is the same beast. The only question is, how much horsepower do you need? You know, do you need a Ford Focus or do you need a Ferrari? Well, if you're stuck in traffic going to your local supermarket, either will do just fine. The screen is superb. The keyboard is fine. It's not backlit. That's a small cost-cutting item. It's Wi-Fi 6E. Using a MediaTek chip, which I normally wouldn't have liked, but it's clearly super cheap, because optimizing the price of this has been an enormous effort, without question. And it does everything that you would expect current Mac OS to do on what you would expect from an M chip, even though it's an A chip, which opens up a very interesting question. What is the real difference between an A chip and an M chip these days? Well, one answer is it doesn't have Thunderbolt, it's got USB-C. There are two USB-C ports. One is USB-C 3 speed and one is USB-C 2 speed. But the 2-speed one is fine because that's probably where you'll plug in your charger. If you plug in something that requires bandwidth into the slow port, it will tell you probably want to plug this into the other hole to get the required performance. So they have thought of that. Build quality is, absolutely superb. This is a proper, full machined aluminium laptop of build quality, right up there with anything at the £2,000-3,000 price bracket, and makes a mockery of an awful lot of cheap laptops from other vendors with plastic cases and bendy keyboards and low quality screens. Yes, it's Mac OS. You either like Mac OS or you don't, but this is not Windows. But you can, now this is the bit that really did knock my socks off, you can install Parallels on it as a hypervisor, and you can run Windows for ARM in a virtual machine on this, and it works really quite well. Don't try doing 3D CAD modeling and AutoCAD on Windows in the VM on this. It doesn't have enough RAM, but it does actually run. Ranning Dak asks on Discord, is it possible to put a proper OS on this like Windows or Linux? Yes and no. Unlike an iPhone or an iPad, you can unlock the firmware on this and install a different operating system should you really wish to do so. And there has been efforts at doing Linux onto the M processors over the last years to varying levels of degree. Frankly, I wouldn't bother. Its performance is excellent. I have actually fired up Final Cut Pro for a giggle, and provided you don't want to do a full sort of BBC grand event, it'll work fine. For the intended target here, for relatively lightweight, straightforward users who want a laptop, they don't want a tablet, they don't want touch, they want a laptop to sit on a desk and do work with, it's absolutely rockingly good. The 5991, as I said, does not have Touch ID. Is that a problem? No, not at all. Major purpose here is for educational use, for example, and you don't want Touch ID in there. They are going after the Chromebook market, and there are excellent Apple management tools for schools to actually control a bundle of these things. They are also, of course, multi-user account on them, unlike an iPhone or an iPad. So you can have multiple accounts on one device. The higher priced one has more storage, 512 gig rather than 256 gig, and a Touch ID, but then that wouldn't bother me either way because my Apple Watch will just unlock the thing immediately for me without having to do anything. So I think it's great. I think it's a real shot across the bow across the other companies in this sort of £500, £600, £700 laptop space, and even the bosses of companies like Asus have publicly stated how surprised they were that they have managed to do this. I think their margins on this are wafer thin, but that doesn't matter. They're drawing a line in the sand, and I think we may see sort of Neo-branded versions of things like Mac Mini and so forth moving forwards. So I commend it to you, gentlemen, and I think it's a cracking piece of kit, and I think it's hotter than hot, which is why it's sold out online for about 4 weeks.
John, a couple of questions that if you'd left unanswered, I'll just ask you them if
Yep.
that's okay. Battery life, what's that like?
Not bad. It's not as good, obviously, as a big, beefy MacBook Pro with huge batteries in it. You'll get somewhere around 13, 14 hours doing work on it. I think, provided you're not doing silly things, you'll certainly get through a working day on it. And I see the hot or not's gone up, claiming it's Apple Neo fake MacBook. This is not fake MacBook. This is as real a full-fat MacBook as any MacBook has ever shipped.
And so, John, you mentioned in very passing the screen.
Yep.
What did you think of it?
I think it's excellent. It's 500 nits brightness. It's not gonna. You're not gonna edit the next version of Aliens on it. Doesn't matter. It's for its intended target. It's a really good screen, good off-axis performance, excellent color performance. Way better color performance than you typically get at this sort of price point.
Yeah. Did you find the touchpad annoying?
No, and I know it's a non-moving one with haptics rather than a fully moving one. I think it hasn't bothered me so far.
Okay. And what about the keyboard experience?
I mean, it's a fairly shallow movement keyboard, but I'm not bothered by that. Again, for what I will be using it for, which is a lightweight thing to carry around with me, maybe have a higher power system back in my digs or my home or my office or whatever, as a carry around note taking device at £599 to do serious work. Don't forget, put whole of Microsoft Office on there, run some serious Excel models on it with no problems, which you can't do on an iPad because Microsoft Office for iPad is the limited version that's shared with Android.
No, this is true. Okay, so at this point I should probably just share that I've also got one. Let's try and put it up there.
Wrong colour,
It's
sir.
the
Wrong colour.
Indigo version, which is a far nicer colour than the weird one that John has chosen. And pretty much, John, I do largely agree with your opinion. And one thing I don't think you quite explained is how compact it is, because it is an incredibly compact laptop.
Yep.
This is a 13-inch screen. I've actually, as it happens, if you have two copies of PC Pro to hand and you place one atop the other, then you will have the exact size of the MacBook Pro, of the MacBook Neo. So that's worth saying. And I will back up. I was surprised. It is slow compared to the M series. It's about, let's just call it roughly half the speed. Just as a basic guide versus the M5. However, it doesn't really matter because, as you say, in applications that are native to Mac OS, it's very, very slick. And I used it for InDesign and was zooming in around, etc., in a 65 megabyte file, because also this only has 8 gigabytes of memory, so there is a limitation there. There were no issues whatsoever. So it was a slick experience. I was surprised by that. But if you do want to do the serious work that John's talking about, absolutely, you'll need a more heavyweight item, heavyweight laptop. Barry, any thoughts from your side?
It looks very impressive to me. The one thing I will rail back against is this. I've seen so many reviews that schools are going to lap this up. And speaking to people in education, in fact, for a feature that's coming up in PC Pro in a couple of weeks' time, that's not the case. And the reason why is because education doesn't just need the device itself or even the management system that Apple's putting with it. It needs things like docking stations to charge 30 of these things up and a whole range of paraphernalia to go with them that Apple isn't currently offering. And that might come in time. It might be this is the first line in the sand and, these will eventually go into schools like Chromebooks and Windows devices, but they are so far behind in that regard at the moment that that's going to take years. This is not something that schools are rushing out to buy right now.
Yeah, but in fairness, the thing was announced and shipped 2 weeks ago. No one knew about it before then.
Right, but it's not everyone's saying schools are going to lap these up. No, they're not.
Well, again,
they need a whole infrastructure to go with them.
It's impossible to answer that question. We have to come back to it in 6 months' time, 9 months' time, see what's happened. Okay, and things like school support for Apple laptops and stuff has been in place for a while. It's just the problem is the hardware's been expensive. This is now at a much lower price point. So let's see what happens moving forward. And what people were saying to you for an article some weeks or months ago is, I don't think, terribly relevant to what we're going to see in 6 months' time. But time will tell.
Well, the average price that schools pay for laptops is still remarkably below what Apple are offering here. So unless there's some big discounts on the price, the retail price, which Apple isn't exactly famed for, then I will take your money, John.
So you mean beyond the $499, Barry?
Beyond, yeah. I mean, schools. Well, I can't betray, but the people I've been speaking to said £300-400 is more like the average price that schools will pay for a laptop. And school hardware budgets are suffering big time at the moment.
Yeah, that's hugely true. Nick, any thoughts from your side?
I wonder if this was where Apple thought it was going to end up with on this road. It's very interesting that it's an A series processor, which obviously was originally designed for small mobile devices. And I wonder whether this ever started out. Obviously, I don't know, but I wonder whether this started out as a product to run iPad OS, sort of like a business iPad with integrated keyboard and trackpad rather than touchscreen. And I'd love to have seen what it would have come out with. But I equally love the idea of a MacBook Neo and not wanting to show my hand, but I'm going to be queuing up when they go back on sale.
Or you can, if you go to an Apple store, you can pick one up today. They're clearly targeting the supply channel into the Apple official stores. I mean, they're in stock in Cambridge today, but it's 4 weeks if you want to buy it online and have it delivered to you.
Okay.
Okay, I think we may be ready for votes. Well, Nick, let's go with you as you kind of have just shown your hand. Hot or not?
Yeah, double thumbs up. It's hot.
Okay, thank you very much. Barry?
Yeah, the scribble about schools aside, I think the hardware itself is excellent, and for the low end, my daughter's already banging at me to get one. So yeah.
Yep. John?
Oh, very hot. I think this is a line in the sand for the industry of quality engineering at this price point. And I absolutely take Barry's point about, schools want the absolute cheapest of cheap. If you could sell something to a school for 59 quid, they would rip your arm off. And he's absolutely right there. But I think for where they're aiming this at, I think they've nailed it completely. And it's going to be very interesting to see the longer term take up of this, whether this is just a flash in the pan or whether it has got sustainable volume. One thing I would say is I saw some figures from Apple recently that something like 40 to 50% of Apple laptop buyers are new to the Apple ecosystem. So this could well be very appealing to them. And that traditional sort of 8-9% or whatever market share, split it how you like, we may see a bump in that space. But we'll have to see.
Yeah. But what's the one big area where Apple is not operating? The budget laptop, which is the volume market area. So
and there's no reason, by the same thinking, that if they can do a 599 laptop with the screen and so forth, why can't they do a 299 Mac Mini Neo?
Yep. Yeah, very good point. Okay, I'm going to give it a hot as well. I do have some reservations, but I do think that it is a phenomenal piece of hardware for the price. And I do think that I do really, really hope that Windows laptop makers are looking at this and thinking, well, why are we not using metal? Why are we not designing these things to last for a few years? Why are we looking at this as being like a bargain basement product line that we should be going for? We should be going for still producing high quality products with high quality screens. There's no reason not to. And Apple has shown that. The other thing I'll commend Apple for, which we didn't cover, was the amazing repairability of this laptop. They've actually got a modular design inside. So if Lee was here, this is actually, if he can get hold of the parts, this is a product that he could repair. And they did a teardown, or someone did a teardown of it. And they got it completely apart in less than 10 minutes, which shows you how easy to repair this is.
Oh, I'm going to put a caveat in there, and I think it was iFixit gave it 6 out of 10, whereas Microsoft Surface equivalent or kind of thing was an 8 out of 10. And let's not forget, albeit at a higher price point, things like Framework, which are entirely take-apartable.
Yes, but my point really being that you can actually just you can swap in and out things like the speakers. If that goes wrong, you can swap in and out the screen easily if that goes wrong. I think that is a massive step forward for Apple and where it's coming from. So there we go. So what was the official vote? Let's have a look.
You have to scroll about 6 weeks up the timeline at the moment.
It's 2/3 say hot, 1/3 says not. So that's not everyone is convinced. And let's see which is the nicer colour. Green gets 32% of the votes, and indigo, the one that I have, John, as a man of better taste, got 68%. That's gone up to 70% as I'm watching, and it wasn't even my vote. So there we go. Let's say that's a wrap for this week's podcast. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us on Discord. Remember, you can always join us, pcpro.link/discord. It's a very friendly bunch, and yeah, you're very welcome. Thank you very much for listening, everyone else, and goodbye until next week.
Bye.
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 Not that I'll be here next week, but someone will be.
Yeah, I'm not around next week either.
Am I? I don't know. Let's have a look. I can't remember. It's all a blur. Do 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 do. 26. Yes, it's going to be me.
Is it just you alone, John?
No,
Solo
me,
podcast?
Darian, Nick, and Barry. Apparently,
What? I'm not on this one.
on the 26th.
Who said that?
Well, Tim did.
Yeah, well, he may have done.
No. I said Darian, John, Nick, Barry, if he can, /once.
Right, yeah. Well, Barry can't and won't.
Well, aren't you such a bundle of joy? Well, in that case, I'll have to run it then next week.
You will. It'll all be fine. All right. Now I need to remember how to stop a podcast. I haven't recorded one for a while, so let me just go to that. When the podcast is over, everyone has said goodbye. You can stop the recording if you want. But this will also immediately cut off anyone listening on Discord. Oh, no. I'm sorry, everyone on Discord. You're going to have to survive without our tones. Barry, where are you going to be next week?
At my desk, just doing another podcast. That's not related to this. Sorry.
Never mind. So Intel have got a vPro event happening next week, so I'm going to go to that. So farewell, everyone, until a couple of weeks. Until May for me, and no, April.
May, say.
Goodbye.
Yeah.